Welcome back to the Armchair Trader podcast. This week, back by popular demand, we have Dan Blondal, who's CEO of Nano One. If you are a Armchair Trader premium subscriber, you may know that you can actually suggest guests for the podcast and also put forward questions to be asked of these guests as well. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you subscribe to the Armchair Trader Plus channel, one of a number of privileges that exist for you there. And some of you have been asking us to get Dan back on the podcast, and so here he is. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Stuart, great to be here again.
So Nano One is a company, we've been covering it for quite some time now. Can you give us a quick summary of the business as it stands at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So Nano One we're a technology company. We're developing process technology to improve the way that lithium-ion battery cathode materials are made. And at the end of the day, it's a novel technology that allows us to to drive down complexity, cost, and an environmental footprint of making cathode materials for lithium-ion batteries. It's all based on what we call our one-pot process, and that allows us to use an alternative sources of lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, iron, phosphorus as input materials, and that's one of the places where we can actually make a big difference on the environmental footprint. And then by combining everything into this one pot, we're able to drive down the complexity in the process itself. And that in turn, the combination of all that drives down the cost. The technology is applicable to a wide range of different cathode materials, lithium iron phosphate, the nickel-based materials, the manganese-based materials. And all of those are applicable to a wide range of different kind of lithium-ion batteries for anywhere from electric vehicle batteries to consumer electronics, power tools, renewable energy storage batteries.
Up until this point, I guess your USP has been the fact that you have this patented technology, which has the potential to help manufacturers build batteries that are more energy efficient, can potentially increase the range, also the range and the life of the batteries. But also, last time you were on the podcast, we were talking about how the company was going to be working with potentially the mining sector to assist in the development of sustainable supply chains, which was an area of focus for you.
Because we put together these kind of constituents, the raw materials, the lithium and the nickel and the manganese together in a different way, we're able to use raw material inputs from slightly different sources. So still lithium and nickel, but not necessarily in the forms that industry is using it today. And that allows us to work with I think a wider range of input materials, and at the end of the day, eliminate some of the sort of chemical footprint or the environmental footprint that's associated with those materials, and that's it's become a big part of the value proposition for us, particularly really since we've just seen such a wide level of interest in reducing environmental footprint. It's just kind of part of the whole ESG message.
You were working with Johnson Matthey, and Johnson Matthey, the strategic decision to get out of the battery space, and that's actually seems to have created an opportunity for Nano One. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, look, it was a bit of a shock when it came, November 11th last year. I remember the date very well, actually. It was a bit of a shock, but at the same time, we immediately saw it as an opportunity in many regards. So the work we were doing with Johnson Matthey, and it didn't end on November 11th. We kept working with them through the year until very recently, actually, was on the eLNO materials that they were making they were planning to make in Europe. And that special brand of cathode materials, we were working with them to make those materials with our process, with our one pot process. But the opportunity that really kind of arose out of Johnson Matthey leaving the business was an entirely different part of their battery business, the LFP work that they were doing in Candiac, Quebec, in eastern Canada. And the opportunity there is that it's a small plant, roughly with 40 plus people, and we saw an opportunity to acquire 40 plus experienced people who've been in the business for between 10 and 15 years. This a fairly large, these 40 people. So there's a tremendous amount of know-how and experience, and in not only in manufacturing of cathode materials, but also in the scale up. many of these people were involved pre-commercial in this plant. So they helped build the plant, design it, um, um, demonstrate the technology, and then bring it to commercial market, and then run it for the last 10 years. So that know-how is well, it's invaluable. You can only get it with 10, 20 years of experience, and so that's a big reason why we were able to, why we were very interested in, and were eventually able to obviously acquire it, and that's been a big part of why we how we were able to turn a relatively shocking moment into something that is very beneficial to Nano One.
Previously, you were working, and I presume still are working, with a number of partners, some of whom you've been able to talk about, some of whom you're not able to talk about. But I get the impression they're fairly big, and you were offering them access to effectively your proprietary technology. This seems like a sort of almost like a gear change for the company, in that you are actually scaling up quite considerably, in your own right.
I understand that people will kind of see it that way. We see the opportunities, the business opportunities, and our business strategy is kind of wide ranging. In some cases, it will make sense for us to license our technology to potential partners. In some cases, we may joint venture, and I think there's an opportunity here, particularly with lithium iron phosphate, to put a relatively large demonstration facility in place to demonstrate our one pot technology being used to make lithium iron phosphate in a small commercial way at a start. It's kind of a springboard to larger events, but it allows us to demonstrate the technology here. So licensing is still very much an opportunity here, but we're putting a credible scale demonstration facility in place that will, we believe, will eventually generate revenues for us. And but at the same time, it demonstrates the technology for the large automotive companies that we can actually drive at that scale. So really, the opportunity for licensing and joint venture still very much exists. We have a very large, call it a very large pilot or demonstration facility that really proves and de-risks the technology in the eyes of our potential partners. But at the same time, it gives us that option to scale up even larger for production purposes, and it will vary depending on the chemistry. So lithium iron phosphate is going to be a different opportunity than the nickel based or the manganese based materials, and ultimately the pilot and the equipment and the facilities and the know-how that we've developed are multi-platform, so we can switch to nickel-based or manganese-based materials. So as we prove out the technology here, we'll be ramping up the other chemistries, and we can switch them out. It's not an overnight thing. You can't do it as quick as that. But all of the equipment and all the underlying principles of the one pot process are transferable to all these other materials.
And is it possible, if the right partner came along, you can actually scale up that facility, or would you be just looking to them to basically build a bigger model in their own backyard?
So the facility itself is going to be restricted by the size of the equipment that's there. We believe that we know that we're a more efficient process. We have less footprint. We don't have to use as much of the equipment as they are currently using at that facility. We can probably drive greater volumes out of that facility, but it's not big enough to, let's say, to to feed the automotive industry. It's a modestly sized plant, but the land itself has room to expand. The plant sits on about a tenth of the land, and so there's quite a bit of opportunity here to build a larger facility that can demonstrate at a automotive scale, for instance. And certainly our plans are to get to a point where we are able to demonstrate it at that kind of a scale. It's roughly 4 to 5 times the size of what is currently being made at Candiac. And the land, there's certainly space on the land to build a facility like that, and that would then become let's call it a blueprint for a larger scale plants that might have many production lines in them. And so an automotive line would need to have an automotive factory might need to have 10 different lines in it, and we can't fit that on the land there. We would actually be doing that, obviously, in conjunction with an automotive partner if we get to that stage. But the ability to expand there allows us to prove that we can get to that automotive scale comfortably, and that's certainly our intent.
literally, I think it was yesterday, you announced some potentially even bigger news, which was an investment from Rio Tinto and a partnership with Rio Tinto, which is obviously a very large name in the mining space. Can you give us a little bit more detail on how that's going to work in practice?
Yeah, so there's a $10 million U.S. investment that comes with this agreement, and a collaboration agreement to work with their technology center. It's actually kind of it's multifaceted. It's in different places of the world, but most of it's going to come here in Quebec, where they have a very large iron and titanium facility just north of Montreal, only about an hour north of Montreal, so very close to the facility at Candiac. And the team there is very innovative. They work on a lot of critical minerals. So they just cracked a big a big problem on the scandium side of things, and are going to be ramping up a scandium kind of critical minerals strategy. They're working on, of course, iron. They make they're one of the world's largest iron powder producers. Those iron powders potentially could be part of our lithium iron phosphate feedstock. So we'll be working with them on evaluating those powders for use in our one pot process in Candiac. So there's a really natural thing there. And then of course they've got a series of different lithium plays as well. I think in Europe you're probably familiar with the ones at in Eastern Europe, but they've got a lithium play in South America, and also one in the U.S. at their sort of boron facility. All of these are going to be important considerations for us as we move things forward.
To be honest with you, I was expecting a deal of this kind of nature for Nano One. I just wasn't expecting it from the mining industry. It was more, I was expecting it from
Yeah.
possibly from one of the big automotive organizations. But I guess it does make sense based on what we were talking about in our previous podcast with you, because at the end of the day, big mining companies like this have to be thinking about how they're going to be deploying that product that they're actually taking out of the ground, how that's going to work in practice, and how they're going to make that applicable to the new energy economy that's emerging.
A big part of this is Rio wanting, access to the know-how and the knowledge without really going that far downstream. So supporting, a potential customer, a potential partner in the future is a big part of their strategy. Looking at this as they dip their feet into the various battery materials. We've come with a solution that actually provides them a bridge from, let's say, iron powders going into internal combustion engines to iron powders going into lithium-ion batteries. And that bridge is really important for them as the whole sort of EV evolution, as the net zero sort of movement changes what their products are being used in. It's going to be very important for them to have that kind of flexibility in their supply chain.
There has been historically for Nano One, you've had a lot of support from the Canadian government, provincial governments, and also continuing support. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how important that has been for the company, and also how Nano One itself fits into the wider sort of Canadian green energy strategy as well.
We have had support both from the provincial and from the federal level for quite some years, and that has largely been about the development of a sustainable green clean technology for pushing the battery, our battery business forward. What's kind of interesting is how things have changed. You've seen it in the UK and every other jurisdiction around the world. Governments are scrambling to bring really the battery supply chain home in some way, as we've seen the collapse of really the global sort of economic supply chain, and we've seen. I think many nations realizing, particularly in the last 6 months, that the secure supply of these raw materials are going to be critical to the transition to net zero electric vehicle type of work. The governments are investing heavily in it, trying to attract, let's say, anchor investors into the country, be it the big automotive companies or big chemical companies or big miners, and we've seen that very actively in Canada in the last 3, 4, 5 months. We've seen a number of really large announcements bringing some of these key players into Canada, and we see those as opportunities, be it the automotives or be it the chemical companies or even some of the big mining activities that are going to be happening in Canada. Every one of those is opportunities for us because our technology can help them differentiate on an environmental level, on a scale level, and obviously on a cost and performance level. And so we see opportunities with almost every one of them to be partners, technology partners, and helping them scale up to meet the demand for the sort of the terawatt hour of lithium-ion batteries, to scale from hundreds of thousands to millions and tens of millions of tons of cathode materials to meet that demand. And Canada's very well poised for that. We've got the green, clean hydroelectric energy to support the manufacturing base, and we've got a lot of the mining and refining know-how here in Canada, and that's what Rio Tinto brings to the table. It's tremendous. I've been to their facility in Sorel, where they're it's just this. It is truly a massive facility. It's been around for 70 plus years, and still a going concern. They're still driving new technological change there, and that to us is very exciting. To get for the world to get to all electric vehicles, the supply chain has to grow up from, as I say, hundreds of thousands of tons to millions or tens of millions of tons. That scale up is not easy, and it requires the know-how, the deep know-how that companies like Rio Tinto have in working in the millions of tons range. They know how to do that. They know what kind of technologies work for that, and so we recognize that there's a great opportunity there. Nano One is in a very unique position. We believe we can scale. We can provide the platform to scale up to those kinds of tonnages, those kinds of volumes with our technology. We're in a unique place to do that. And now with Rio Tinto, we bring all this know-how along with it. And Nano One's small. We don't have the experience. Rio Tinto's, this facilities. Most of the people we talk to have been working there for 16, 20 years, and they're still innovators. They still think very much in an innovative way, and we very much look forward to sort of bringing that into our wheelhouse through this partnership.
I know there's not an awful lot you can talk about in terms of future plans, and I know there's partnerships that you're not really allowed to go into any detail on. But can you give listeners a little bit of flavor about next steps with the company in the wake of this deal?
Well, listen, if we take the Rio Tinto and the Johnson Matthey deal, there's a lot of dust to settle and figure out. The acquisition of the Johnson Matthey facility won't close for probably another 6 months, mostly because Johnson Matthey have obligations that they have to fulfill. So part of the deal was giving them the time to finish their obligations before they handed off the plant to us. But I'm here in Montreal today, and I'm going to be spending time with a number of the employees there, working through the transition plan. How do we get to take over, and what happens after we take over the facility? We will be converting it to the one pot process is really the ambition, and really the idea there is to drive down the cost of making lithium iron phosphate. With the support of Rio Tinto, we think that that'll help really accelerate the whole underlying process. So, look, we've got a lot of work to do on all fronts, but super excited about it because we can now talk about it and talk about the people and the groups we're working with. We continue to collaborate with automotive companies and with chemical companies. We haven't talked about the BASF deal that we had last week, and that obviously BASF is one of the world's largest chemical companies as well. And so we have a joint development agreement with them, much like we did with Johnson Matthey, but it's with their brand and flavor of cathode materials, and they were looking to develop their materials using our process. Again, all of it's to drive down costs, eliminate waste, improve the environmental footprint, and reduce the complexity of making cathode materials and ready it for the terawatt hour world. How do we get to these kind of scales? And one of the only ways to do it is we've got to get rid of the byproducts and the waste streams that are in the supply chain if we're going to get up to those kind of scales. And our technology can do that. And that's one of the reasons that companies like BASF and Rio Tinto are interested in working with us.
Well, that's great that you're getting some interest from such major players now. It holds out great prospects for Nano One in the years ahead.
Indeed, and there's more to come. As I said, I think everyone on your podcast knows we've been working with various OEMs, automotive at the automotive level. And we continue to work with them there as they figure out their plans. Look, ours is a next generation technology, and it's in the supply chain. It's not we're not aiming to just put materials in batteries today, because we're trying to make this new generation of materials that are going to be cleaner, greener, faster, cheaper kind of concept. But and that's why these deals and these, I think these collaborations with the auto companies, they take time to develop because they have to come to, comfort level with our technology in order to back it and scale it. The Johnson Matthey deal and the Rio Tinto deal will bring a tremendous amount of credibility. And we already know it's already bringing credibility to the table with these big auto companies, and the backing of the Canadian government has been a really a big part of that as well, because they're talking to the big auto companies and the big chemical companies to try and bring them together. So they're playing matchmaker and trying to how do we take this big company and get them involved with Nano One here in Canada, and to drive a supply chain that takes you from mines all the way through to mobility.
That sounds fantastic. It sounds like you've got an extremely busy rest of the summer as well. So I wish you all the best with that, and hope to catch up with you again on the podcast further down the line when we've got some more news to discuss.
Great. Always good to talk with you, Stuart, and really appreciate being here with your audience. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Armchair Trader podcast. Make sure you visit our website, www.thearmchairtrader.com, for your daily dose of financial markets news, and sign up to our free newsletter there.